Howdy folks, and welcome to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're cooking up some old-fashioned grits, and then we're going to make a delicious breakfast casserole with them. Okay, now we're going to start with the grits, and what you need to make grits are grits, boiling water, which I've got over on the stove, and a little bit of salt. And most folks have to have at least butter in them, but we'll get to that in a minute. Now, when you're making grits, you want about 2 parts water, 1 part grits, which would mean 1 cup of grits and 2 cups of water, and you can keep multiplying it like that, or you can reduce it like that. I like a little bit of extra water in them because I think they get a little too dry if they don't have a little extra in them. So I do about 2.5 cups of water per cup of grits. But you can adjust them and play with it and get it to the consistency that you like it. And you don't have to do that. You can actually adjust the consistency of your grits after they're cooked. You can add a little bit of milk to them, which I like to do, or you can add a little bit of water to them. So let's take our grits and our salt over to the stove where our water's boiling, and we're going to start this, and then we'll talk about what's in the casserole. Now, when you're making grits, you want to make sure your water comes to a full rolling boil before you add your grits. Like this, you want great big bubbles in it. And go ahead and put your salt in the water. And the other thing you have to do when you're making grits to keep them from sticking together and turning them into a lump, besides getting this water to a full boil, is as you add your grits, add them slow and stir them. And that keeps the grits separate in the boiling water so that they don't stick together and you have a big old lump of grits. Now, once you get your grits in there and your water comes back to a boil, you want to turn them all the way down on low and put a lid on them and just let them sit there and simmer for 20 minutes. You might want to stir them once or twice if your stove doesn't turn down real low to keep them from sticking to the bottom. And it's a good idea somewhere around 10 minutes just to give them a quick stir anyway. Now for our casserole, what I have is a 1/2 pound of sausage here and a cup of cheddar cheese. You can use any kind of cheese in this you want, and you can change the flavor of the casserole dramatically by changing the flavor of the sausage or the cheese. And I also have a 1/2 cup of milk. The milk is gonna make almost like a gravy in the casserole. You don't necessarily have to have it, but it really makes the casserole richer and creamier, and I just like the way it comes out better. You can add a little bit of water to it if you want to, but you're going to have to add a little bit of some kind of liquid to it because just the liquid in the grits is not going to be enough to make your casserole. And you want about 2 or 3 tablespoons of butter in it. If your sausage is really greasy, which this is really lean, you might want to keep your sausage grease and not use as much butter, but that's up to you. And the other thing I got here is a little bit of sugar, but I'm going to take this over to the stove because I want to get my sausage cooking while my grits are cooking. When you cook your sausage for this casserole, you just want to crumble it up. You could even, if you wanted to, use some of those pre-cooked sausage crumbles that they sell, you know, all ready to go. But if you're cooking real old-fashioned grits, I'd fry me up some fresh sausage. And having the fresh sausage fried up gives you a lot of flavor in your pan that you wouldn't have if you use those. And we're going to use that flavor. We're going to add our milk right to the sausage, and that's going to almost make like a gravy in it. And all that flavor that's in the pan where the sausage cooked is going to be in our casserole. So it does have a little more flavor if you fry up some fresh sausage for sure. Like I said, this is super lean stuff. If your sausage has more fat in it, this actually came from Samantha and David. They raised the meat and had it processed. Now, how fine you crumble your sausage up when you fry it to go in this casserole really is a matter of personal preference, and it's also kind of a matter of how many people you're going to have to feed. If you've got to feed a great big crowd and you're on a budget, you can actually double your grits in this. Crumble your sausage up a little bit finer. Instead of using 1 cup of grits, you would use 2 cups of grits and 4 cups of water, or 5 cups even, to make it a little more moist. And just use half a pound of sausage and feed a whole lot of people with very little money, because grits are a very inexpensive food. They're a very basic food, and they're something that you can add a lot of flavors to. I mean, you can make a ton of different meals with grits, just like you can with cream of wheat, oatmeal. You know how all those have different flavors. And if you're serving them for breakfast, you can do different fruit flavors like you do with oatmeal. You could add a little jam of some sort to it, or some kind of preserves to give you a fruit flavor. But you can do, and you know, you'd have a bowl of hot cereal like a bowl of hot oatmeal, only it's corn instead of oats. And but what you can do with grits that you can't do with oatmeal is you can add bacon and sausage and stuff like that. And you know, those flavors don't really go in a bowl of oatmeal. So you have a lot more options with grits. Grits are one of those foods that saved folks from starvation for centuries. They're a very basic staple. They have a long shelf life. If you have never tried grits or you haven't had them in a long time, it's a good thing to get and add to your pantry, because they're certainly going to stay good all winter, and they're going to be good even next winter because of the extended shelf life. It's something that you can buy in bulk and save a lot of money, because we all know the bigger the bag you buy, the cheaper it is per pound. And you know, it'll really help you stretch your budget. And you can have grits just be the meal. Just have a bowl of hot cereal and put a little butter and maybe a little bit of sugar in it. I love them like that, and I'll have them just a meal of grits. Or you can make grits and fix bacon and eggs and biscuits and stuff with it, and you know, have a big country breakfast and make that part of your country breakfast. But because you have the grits with it, people aren't going to eat as much of the bacon and the eggs, and it's going to make that expensive stuff go farther. Or you can make a casserole with it like this. Okay, our grits have just about 4 minutes left, and they have soaked up all of the water, but they're not completely done yet. You do want to cook them for the full 20 minutes so that all of the grain in there gets tender. If you don't cook it long enough, you're going to have little crunchy bits of grits in your grits, and that's not really what you want. But while that's finishing, I'm going to go ahead and add my milk to my sausage crumbles, because they are done, and kind of let you see what this does. Now, normally when you're making gravy, of course, you would add a little flour to this, but we're not going to do that because of the thickening properties of these grits. They're going to thicken this up, and it'll actually be quite a bit thicker than gravy even. You know, cornstarch can be used to thicken just like flour can, and because the grits are made out of corn, they're going to thicken it up. You won't even really know the milk is in there, except for the fact that it will all be creamy. And you can see how dark my milk turned. That's because of all of the stuff where I cooked the sausage in the pan. And that's a lot of flavor, so you do want that in your casserole. I want to encourage y'all not to be worried or nervous or stressed about what's going on right now. Just keep praying and know that God has this. Keep praying for our country, keep praying for our leaders, and keep praying for the truth. And, you know, pray for God's will to be done in this, because you see, God has this way of waiting until the last minute to give a miracle. When everything seems hopeless, that's when God works miracles. I mean, it's not really a miracle unless it could only be done by God. So keep praying. God still has this. Don't worry about it. It's all going to be okay. He's going to take care of it, and He's going to take care of you. Okay, our grits have been cooking about 20 minutes now, so they should be all good and done. And I'm going to scoop a little bit out here because I made a little bit extra because I wanted to show you just a bowl of plain grits. And you can see they're very thick. That's why I like to add a little bit of milk to mine to adjust the texture of it. But put a little butter on there and sprinkle you a little bit of sugar on. Oh, not too much. And that's how I like my grits, right there. Just butter and a tiny bit of sugar. But because we're making a casserole out of these, we are going to add our grits to, and I didn't have my little pan cozy. We're going to add our grits to our sausage. And we're also going to go ahead and put our butter in there. Now that sausage was super lean, so I definitely want some butter in mine or it's going to be dry. But if you have a lot of fat in your sausage, you can just use your sausage fat if you want to, or you can drain it and use butter. And I'm going to go ahead and add almost all my cheese. I'm going to leave about 1/4 cup to put on the top of it. And I'm going to stir this up until it melts. Now, if you're making this at home, you can add the grits to the sausage, or you can add the sausage to the grits. If you've got leftover sausage where you did like a big Sunday breakfast or something, you can certainly just make this with a little leftover sausage. Just crumble the sausage up in your grits and have some sausage and cheese grits for breakfast the next day and not really have to cook again. I mean, if you just, all you're doing is boiling a pot of grits, and you can use leftover bacon in it if you did a big meal and you've got leftover bacon. Okay, that's all stirred up pretty even, and you can see the cheese is all completely melted. And you can also see that that milk we put in there is just kind of all soaked up in those grits, because they do have incredible thickening properties. And if you wanted it even a little bit runnier, a little bit more gravy-like, you could add more milk to it. You could do a whole cup of milk in this if you wanted to. And that would also make it go a little bit farther and feed a few more people. Just kind of, you know, play with it and make it your own. Now, you do want to serve this hot, because the longer it sits here, the thicker those grits are going to make your gravy in it, or your whatever kind of moisture you added to it. And it's just going to get thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. And even if you're just doing plain grits, you really want to serve those hot too. Almost as soon as you take them out of the pan, because grits are better hot. And the hotter they are, the better they are. So now you know how to make real old-fashioned grits, the way folks have eaten them for several hundred years. And you also know how to make a delicious, easy breakfast casserole. If you wanted to, you could stick this in the oven under the broiler for just maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but have your oven broiler already heated up and stick it in there, because you don't want to let this sit, and you could brown that cheese in the broiler for just a couple of minutes before you serve it. This casserole is a really good one to make. It is gluten-free because grits are made out of corn. There's no gluten. And it's also egg-free. And there aren't a lot of egg-free breakfasts that you can even make. Almost everything you make for breakfast has egg in it, whether it's muffins or a casserole or whatever. Even pancakes and stuff have eggs in them. So this is something you can make if you've got a big crowd and maybe a lot of people with allergies. And it's easy if you've got a big crowd. You're not going to have to spend all day in the kitchen cooking. So thank y'all very much for joining us in the Hillbilly Kitchen. If you haven't already, don't forget to click like and subscribe before you leave. Give these grits a try. Until next time, remember to put God first.